This is Buying Miami, Life, Love, and Real Estate. And I am your host, Joanne Jones. I'm a second-generation Miamian, and I am obsessed with real estate. And also living your best life here in the best city, Miami. Today, I have Jodi Strang of Strang, Adam, PA. And why? Why do I have you on the show, Jodi? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, Jodi wrote the law section of Buying Miami. So, and Buying Miami is now kind of like evolved into this podcast, and I've had this platform now that I could bring the book to life, and I'm individually bringing all the contributors in. So today is real estate law, and unfortunately we only have 30 minutes. So there's so many rabbit holes we can go down. We could talk shop for hours, but we're going to talk today about expenses that are involved at the closing table. So a little bit about Jodi. I have known Jodi, I was thinking about this last night, since early 2000, since the Mirador days. The Mirador like days with years. Marnique. Yeah. Yeah. Has it been 20 years? No.
It's about that. Yeah.
Stop it.
Well, like maybe 21 years.
No. Let me think. I'm going to be 49. So maybe, yes. I think I was in my early 30s.
I was in my 20s.
Jeez Louise, where does time go? So you were in law school, and I had just started off as a realtor. I always say that word wrong, realtor. And then now as time has gone by, you had your office on the beach, and you have one in the Grove.
Yep.
And I started working with you. I used to make you do all my rentals. Yes. And she would hold escrow for me for free. And that got old pretty quick. And
I'll still do it.
I just try not to do rentals. But no, and then we started working together on the closing side. And yes. I loved working with your office. You have a great team with Giselle and Jordan.
Yeah.
And very well organized. And it just is, it's a pleasure. But also one thing that I love about working with you, and why I continue to work with you, is because I have access to you. Like, it's not like at 5:01 your phone's cut off. I mean, there's times that I've called your office at 7:00 at night, and bless your heart, you're there. You shouldn't be there, but you're there.
Well, real estate in South Florida is 24/7. Yeah. We're available on the weekends and the evenings. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Real estate doesn't stop down here.
It doesn't sleep. Real estate does not sleep. But also, you've saved a lot of deals for me. Like, there's times that things have come up and it's beyond my scope as a realtor, and I had to get you involved. And I was always so grateful to have you on my team, because there's times that you've saved, like, I thought the deal was dead, and you would get on the phone at on the 11th hour with the other attorney and make it happen. So that's why I always love using your firm, because you guys are such a well-oiled machine. And if you have to get into the ring and make it happen, you do.
We have two mottos. It's number one is time kills all deals, and be a deal maker.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes, get it done, get the transaction closed.
Yeah. Yeah. This industry, this career field, it forces you to have emotional intelligence and patience and compassion. So that's one thing that I've had to learn. So, okay, what I want to talk to you about today is this podcast, this whole movement is about educating buyers on what it costs to buy a property. So a lot of times people, if it's their first time buying a property, or they're buying a property from another state, they don't know what it's going to cost besides their down payment. So last week we had Rudy Pineda from More Lending that kind of broke down the mortgage expenses at closing. And today, I want to kind of walk through buyers what's going to happen on the week of closing. The week of closing is very important. You need to not plan your vacation. You need to be around as a buyer.
Or not.
Well,
we can do mobile. We could do online notarization, so you could be anywhere.
Actually, you can be anywhere. That has become and you're one of the first.
We do a lot of those.
You are one of the first closing agents that have adopted online notarization.
We actually started I think it was January 5th of 2020. We were one of the handful of first pioneers with this. So,
of online notarizing.
Our clients can be anywhere for closing. Buyers can be wherever. We can
which is great. So, but what I want to get into with you is, aside from I always tell buyers, like, plan to spend about 1.5 to 2% of your sale price on your closing cost, in addition to whatever your down payment is.
Yes. Or less.
It could be less.
It could be less. The first place you started, you look in the contract. I mean, the majority of transactions in South Florida have what they're called in the contract, the Miami-Dade provision, Miami-Dade Broward provision. And another reason why it's important to have a realtor to check that box, because that's standard and customary. And when you check that box, the seller pays for the title search and lien search. And then the buyer just pays for the title insurance and standard, typical closing settlement fee or attorney's fee. And then really just lender costs. The majority of everything else is on the seller side.
Yes.
So that saves them money when you check that box for a buyer.
I always check that box. So what's going to happen typically by law, the buyer has to get we call it the ALTA. ALTA, the ALTA, the closing statement. They're going to get that 3 days before closing. They should. It's pretty important that they get that 3 days before closing. And that is a statement that says who pays what. And what's interesting about this statement is that it's the pages are numbered and the lines are numbered. So when you're navigating around this statement, you could be like, oh, what's up with line number 12? What's and then it also tells you, it's very transparent. It tells you what the borrower's expenses are and what the seller's expenses are. So actually, I pulled my ALTA this morning from when I did my closing with you a few years ago. And I'm really happy that my interest rate is 3.15%. I got in just before it all went to hell. That was 20. When did I close? 2021, December, right around Thanksgiving of 2021. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about is like these expenses. And one thing that I didn't realize is, first of all, there are taxes and there are expenses that are incurred by the buyer that basically transfers the ownership in the county records from the current seller to the new owner. Correct?
Right. Those are documentary stamp taxes, and those are typically paid by the seller.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's good to know. You would think that I know all this stuff, but it's kind of out of my wheelhouse.
No, that's what I'm here for.
I know. That's why I have you. And another thing that buyers usually don't anticipate are escrowed items. Now, escrowed items are things that the lender are going to require, right?
Yes.
Right.
Like reserves. If your lender is escrowing for taxes or insurances. Some lenders aren't escrowing, but if they are, you have to budget for those reserves. And depending on what time of year you're closing, will be the factor in determining how many months in reserves will be collected. So
yeah, you would always want to close like in December as opposed to January, right?
For homestead purposes, yes.
Yes, for homestead purposes. So you want to talk a little bit about homestead?
Well, where do you want to go with that?
Well,
especially for first-time home buyers or buyers moving to Florida, which many are from New York and California, homestead is huge. There's obviously caps on how much your assessed value can increase. So there's tax savings there. And then also for most buyers moving from New York and California, they want that no state tax on a federal level.
Right.
So one way of proving that, Florida is your primary is by filing homestead.
Correct.
So
you want to close, it was a big deal recently. I had a closing the end of 2021 with a couple, and we closed on December 31st.
Yes.
Was it you? Did you?
Maybe.
Jeff and Heidi?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
The doctor?
Yes.
Yeah. We had to close. And yes, it was you because we had to do a post-occupancy agreement.
Yep. And we had to rush to recording.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
But we had to get them closed by the 31st so then they could, because here's the thing, guys, what we're talking about is if you close, like, let's say after January 1st, you can't claim homestead for that year.
Right.
So let's say you're going to close, you want to close on December 2022. You don't want to close in January of 2023 because then you can't claim homestead for The year of
You have to wait a whole
2023
year.
because you have to live there a complete year. Okay.
You have to take residence prior to January 1st.
Exactly.
So yeah, you don't want to lose the year for a few days.
Absolutely.
But it does lower your costs. And remember, I mean, part of if you're having to, like, back to the fees that you were speaking of, if you have to place reserves for your escrow accounts, you're going to be getting a pretty big credit from the seller for the year-to-date property taxes. So that tends to offset it. So when Joanne says closing costs are typically 1.5% to 2%, I mean, the majority, at least the ones that I close, I would say less than 1.5% generally. Depending on lender fees.
Yeah.
You know, but again, the buyer really should only have to pay for closing fee, which is generally anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000, maybe less.
That's like the attorney's fee to do the paperwork and to file the big thing that the attorney does is they transfer the ownership in the county records from the previous owner to the new owner.
Correct.
They, on the buyer side, they're going to collect all the money and disperse it.
Yes.
They're going to review the contract. For the most part, they're going to review it to make sure it's not like, incorrect. And,
we basically take it from contract to closing. We're reviewing the entire contract, holding escrow, pulling title search, lien search, tax search, name search, estoppel, making sure that there are no open permits, no violations. Once it's clear to close, of course, working with the lender, if there is a lender, then basically, once it's clear to close, dispersing, trading docs for monies, and then going into recording. Yeah. So all of it.
Right. So usually then the buyer's going to have their taxes that they're going to have to pay, like the doc stamp taxes. Like those are taxes that the county collects to transfer ownership from one person to another, correct?
So the seller pays that.
Okay. So
seller pays that. So buyer's just this closing fee, which is typically around $1,000, give or take. And of course, depending on which law firm or title company you use, but ours is generally around $1,000 to $1,500. And then you have your title insurance. Title insurance is there are calculators that you can use online, but generally speaking, it's about $575 per 100,000. And then you have your lender fees costs if it's not a cash deal. And then, really, that's really it.
Yeah, that's really it. So let's talk a little bit about title insurance.
Yes.
I know what it is, but I would like your definition of what it is.
So
explain.
Yeah, and there's this whole thing about how title insurance is optional. I don't think it's optional because I think that if I tell a client not to obtain title insurance, I think that I know better, and I think that that's really grounds for malpractice, to be honest with you.
But don't mortgages require title insurance?
Lenders do. But lenders require title insurance, but they give the owner's policy the optional title, like I should say label, okay? Mm-hmm. It's not really optional because how can a lender be insured and the owner is not? It's just you're not buying a bag of potatoes here, okay? Yeah. It's important because it gives you insurance on your investment to cover you against any liens or encumbrances from prior to your ownership. Mm-hmm. And why is that important? I mean, it's important because there could be a claim out there that no one knows of and it's not recorded, like an equitable lien or someone claiming an equitable lien on a property. An equitable lien is where someone claims that, they're owed monies on a property and there's no mortgage of record. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, really? I've seen that before. Mm-hmm. Or like, a seller that sells and they say that they're single, but they're really married. And there's some spouse or ex-spouse out there that says, hey, I wasn't noticed for this sale and I have a spousal interest in the property. Mm-hmm. Okay, surprise. You can't find that in a title chain.
I could see that happening in Miami.
And now, I don't, the average deal that crosses my desk is maybe, $1 million, give or take. Yeah. You don't spend, that kind of money without having protection against claims.
Right.
So
Well, and in the book, I have a whole section on title insurance, and I have a whole list. In fact, I had to shorten the list of reasons why you would need title insurance, things that come up. So that's a good thing to look at in the book, because it's like one of those things where you don't know if you don't know.
Right.
So now, from your point of view, from a real estate attorney's point of view, if you can sit down with a new buyer, a new homeowner who's in the process of buying a home, what are some of the things, what are some of the pro tips that you would give them? Imagine if it was like your cousin or your little sister or, you know, someone that you love, you know, what are some things that you'd be like, make sure that, what are the pro tips from a seasoned South Florida real estate attorney that you want buyers to know about?
So
go, you're up.
That's a loaded question, because it definitely depends on the deal, and it depends on what they're buying.
Let's
house,
say
condo.
it's a condo. They're getting a mortgage. It's going to be, you know, in Brickell, or it's going to be in Little Havana or Miami Beach.
Okay, so let's go that path. So I would start by reviewing the entire contract with them. Okay, and I would definitely tell them, look, have your escrows held with your attorney.
Yeah, the buyer's attorney.
Not the seller's attorney.
Yes.
You know, and not with a title company and not with a brokerage. I would hold it with your attorney, number one. Number two, if it is a condo and it is financing, I would have that lender run a project approval early on in the transaction.
So that would be like the condo questionnaire?
Making sure, making sure that project is approved first, because the worst thing is to go all the way through the transaction, and on the eve of closing, the collateral is not approved because of the building.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. I'm
emphatic about that. And I think that comes back to buyers having a good realtor. Listen, the contract is overwhelming. It's 7 pages. And the good thing about the contract that we use is that every line is numbered, every page is numbered. So at least you can navigate your way around it. But if you don't want to sit there and go through the whole contract, I tell buyers, like, what are your biggest concerns? And then I go through those aspects of the contract with them.
Yes, we do. We do the same too. And, you know, I also would always add in the clause in section 20 that the seller shall close out any open or expired permits or violations, if any, prior to closing, because the contract, the way the standard form is written, it doesn't require that. And who is in the best shoes to close out a permit? It's the seller, obviously. Yeah. So, you know, those two items, that you're buying a condo, project approval, and adding in that clause in section 20 are huge.
Well, yeah, you taught me that a long time ago. I add the clause that you wrote to every contract, and it's in my little pea brain. I didn't understand for the longest time why I had to do it. But anytime I sent you a contract and it wasn't there, you would like kick it back to me. And finally, I realized that because the contract just says that the seller needs to help, and it doesn't say that the seller is required to close out any permits. So that's very important.
And then, of course, the Miami-Dade provision to keep the closing costs low.
Correct.
Because that kicks over the title search and lien search to the seller's side. So,
also, the way that it works in Florida is the realtors are able to write the contracts.
Yes.
And the reason why we're able to write the contracts is because we have standard contracts that we all use. And so we all are working with the same contracts, which makes it so much easier for us, because whereas in other states where the attorneys write the contracts, it's, unless you sit there and you read that contract word for word, you don't really know what you're getting.
Exactly.
Now, I've been doing this a long time, and every year I go to a contract class, because either they change the contract or I learn something new. On the contract. So then, so that's for a condo. What if they're buying a single family home? And what would you say? Like, make sure, what about this? Don't forget that.
I would say, well, lender's going to require a survey. I say always get a survey. Even if it's a cash deal, get a survey. Know if there are any encroachments on your property, or if your property is encroaching on another. That's huge. What else? Let's say.
Well, let's back that up, because people first of all, a survey is a picture
Yes.
of what your property looks like, where it ends, where it begins, how many feet here, how many feet there. And it's like a picture of your property as it's recorded with the county. And it'll also say if there's an encroachment is an area of your property that the county or the government, let's say in general, has the right to trespass or get onto your property without letting you know.
Right. Know where your easements are and know if there are any encroachments on adjacent properties or vice versa.
Correct.
Just so that you know what you're dealing with. And then also I would say definitely add in that permit clause again. And then I would also add in, especially on a house, I would add in the requirement that the seller provide a seller disclosure.
A requirement of that. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's not always required.
It's not always required. I mean, a good listing agent would get a seller's disclosure like right time they take the listing. But it doesn't always happen.
Right. But I would make it something that is, put a clause in section 20 that says seller shall provide a seller disclosure within 3 days of effective date. I would also make, if there is a second deposit, I would make it due after due diligence period. So if due diligence is 10 days, make it 11.
Right.
If due diligence is 15, make it 16.
I always do that.
No. And then, yes, get a full inspection and get your insurance quotes early on, especially now in Florida with insurance rates going crazy.
Yeah, no, I've lost. I mean, I almost have lost deals because the insurance is like a shocker.
Get quotes early on.
Yeah.
And then there might even be some mitigation efforts on the part of the sellers that they can partake in prior to closing to lower the insurance rates.
So let's talk about that. What's that all about?
Like, let's say, you have an inspection and then maybe there's some issue that they found on the roof that could be a minimal repair and it could lower the insurance rates because the insurer is saying, look, that needs to be repaired. We'll get it done prior to closing so that you're not paying, thousands upon thousands of extra dollars in your insurance binder.
Right.
Something simple that could save thousands.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So what are some of the biggest shockers or things that you've seen or like gaffes that maybe people had that their realtor, like, you're like, how could this realtor let this happen? Like, what are some of the biggest things that you've seen or biggest, I guess, warnings, like make sure you do this or make sure you do that? Because I know that you see all kinds of stuff all day long.
Yes, but the thing is, when the deal comes in, when it's us, we go through the entire contract with the client. So we try to avoid those issues before they arise. But I would tell you, like, maybe if we get calls from someone who is already in contract and maybe it's not a realtor that we work with, I'm surprised that, so many contracts are missing particular items like that. Like, for example, that the seller doesn't have to close out permits. And then I have to tell them, well, hey, you're a couple days prior to closing, you signed this, and it doesn't require that the seller close out these permits or violations that are not liens.
So how does that affect them?
I
mean, I guess that would affect the lender.
It affects the buyer because the buyer has to do it.
Right.
Spend the money, open the permit, get a contractor. It's expensive. And how is this missed?
Right.
That. Also, not requiring, like on a condo, not requiring condo docs for review, not citing the parking space if it comes with parking or storage, like just totally missing from the contract, but yet, it either does or doesn't come with parking.
Right.
I mean, but again, that doesn't happen often in my office because the majority of the realtors send it to us. We catch it early on and we work with that agent to avoid issues before they arise. Well,
and listen, it's an old adage. You have 20% of the agents doing 80% of the business. Yeah. So usually you have a seasoned agent that knows what they're doing, but sometimes you don't.
Or not. And then that agent will say, hey, can you help me with this? And I'll walk them through.
Right.
So.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, well, Jodi, listen, thank you so much for coming in today. And I mean, it feels like there's so much more that we could talk about, but they're rabbit holes. Like we could go down some rabbit holes and keep this going. But I just wanted people to kind of understand the importance of having a real estate. Well, you need a real estate attorney on a transaction.
Yes.
You need to have someone, like one of the first things that I ask people is, who's your attorney? And they're like, what? Huh? What do I need an attorney for? And I have to explain to them, like, you need an attorney to hold escrow. You need an attorney to collect all the money, to disperse it. You need an attorney to transfer the title from the previous owner to you.
And one thing most buyers don't realize is that in Florida, you can choose to either have an attorney handling your title as closing agent, or you can have a title company, and the fees and costs are pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. I mean, not for all attorneys, but I would say the majority of the ones that focus on closing transactions, the fees and costs are pretty much the same as a title company, but yet you're actually, having an attorney represent you per se.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I think that is an added bonus.
For the same pricing.
Yeah, for the same pricing, you get the added bonus of having an attorney. Yes. Whereas a title company can close a transaction, they can write title, but see, attorneys can write title as well in Florida. So correct. That's why it works out. Correct. I usually go that route. Sometimes I have clients that want to use a title company, and that's great too. A title company is headed up by an attorney. So ultimately there is an attorney in the mix at some point. But
most buyers do that because they think that having an attorney is more expensive, and it really isn't.
No, it's not. And one thing I love, I mean, you guys are a boutique agent. You crank it out. You have offices in Coconut Grove and Miami Beach. Yes. And you just do high quality work. So, I mean, that's why I'm so happy to use you for so long. And I really appreciate the time that you took to write the real estate section in the book. And now people can kind of get a better idea of who you are and how to find you. So yeah, Strang Adams, PA. What's your website?
Is stranglaw.com.
Okay. And Strang is what? Strang?
It's like strong, but instead of an O, it's an A.
Okay. All right. Got it. Well, Jodi, listen, thanks again for coming in. It's always a pleasure to see you. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
A part of this journey with me along the way. I mean, you've been a part of my real estate journey in my life for so long. I'm grateful. So it's exciting to have you here and to see both of us grow in this industry and continue to evolve and work on new things. I had Raphael on the other day. From Lumara. And for those of you guys who don't know what Lumara is, a cryptocurrency platform that brings together buyers and sellers who want to trade in cryptocurrency. So when I was trying to figure out like what this is all about, I brought Jodi in, and we were fascinated by the ability and how easy it is to buy with cryptocurrency now.
Correct.
Like you could do it.
Yes.
Like you could be a cryptocurrency closing agent, and you didn't think you could.
No.
And you can. So for those of you who are interested in cryptocurrency and buying with cryptocurrency, check out my first episode and know that Jodi was kind of involved in bringing all that together too. I basically bring her in whenever I can, whenever there's a law, any questions, I call her. So anyways, thanks again. Thank you. Congratulations on everything new and beautiful in your life. And ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next time. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Buying Miami, Life, Love, and Real Estate. And be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, and all the other podcast channels. So look for us, like us, follow us, and that's it.